My name is Dan L. I'm a jBASE support engineer, and I've been asked to put together a little write-up on what to do when your printer doesn't work on jBASE Linux. Now, there's two different things that we'll be attacking here. One is that the printer doesn't work and has worked before, and the other is that the printer doesn't work and you've set it up and just don't understand why the new printer is not working. So what to do when a printer does not work, either way. Firstly, jBASE printers, they're usually simply a path to a Linux printer. Now, sometimes they're a path to a Linux script or a command. That command could even be a jBASE program, because the way jBASE printers work is they actually just send the print job to standard out, and then whatever you attach in the prog portion of your printer command is the standard in. That is, the script will get stuff with an input or a read. That would mean that the command is allowing things to come from standard out, which most of your Linux printer commands do. Or if you were writing a jBASE program, that could actually be done with an input. So the other side of a jBASE printer that you set up is normally a Linux process running on the back side. Now, as you know, jBASE writes C code, so the Linux program running on the other side could be a jBASE program. So that's a little more complicated. I'm going to really just go into an LP type of printer, which is probably 90% of the printers out there on Linux today. So the very first thing you want to do when a Linux printer is not working is find that Linux command for the printer. What Linux command was used to create the printer? If you're the administrator, you probably know the command you used. If not, or if a printer stops working and it's months later, I know if it's days later, I forget what I did, you can use the list PTR and it will show us what the printer command is. So we're going to do that right now. So list PTR at the JSH. So we can see that we have two printers set up on this machine. You have the LPTR, the standard printer, and then we have a program printer. Remember, I was saying almost always a jBASE printer is a program that just runs on the other side. So it's a program type printer. We called it Office Laser, and it is doing the Linux command of LP-D laser 1. So that's the thing that's the command. That's what we're going to be looking at in the Linux side to make sure that that's working. Now, the way I would assign that printer is just with a sp-assign F1 if you're used to multi-value world where you only had FQs, because it's form queue number 1. So F1. If I do an sp-assign question mark, that will show me, oops, I got to spell it right, sp-assign question mark. That will show me I am on line 401. I'm getting one copy to form number 1, and the name of that is Office Laser. The nice thing on jBASE is I could also do an sp-assign equals and say Office Laser. That would do the exact same thing. So if you're in the jBASE world, and you create your printers with names, it's sometimes just a little easier for people to know, oh, it's the Office Laser instead of F27 or whatever. So you can do sp-assign equals Office Laser. With that said, kind of went off on a tangent there, but I tend to do that. The underlying Linux process, in this case, the LP-D laser 1, is it working? If it's working, then we'll be looking at jBASE printers. Most of the time, you'll find it is not working. So because it is a jBASE, because it is a Linux process, we want to do this from the bash prompt. So the easiest way to go to the bash prompt from jBASE is to just simply type in bash. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm at the bash prompt now. I'm at the $sign. You'll notice within this document, there will be times that it's $sign, and there will be other times where it's £sign. The difference between those is this is a user, and this is an administrator. When it's a $sign, it means you are in as an administrator. We'll go over that a little bit later. But for now, just to run the print job, we can do it just as an individual user. So the very first thing we need to do is see if Linux prints a print job from Linux. If it does, then the problem is jBASE. If it does not, which is probably going to be a large percentage of the time, then we're going to go into what Linux needs to do. So I will echo, this is a test. If I do that all by itself, you'll see it just prints it to the screen. If I put a pipe character at the end, which is what we're doing here, and do LP minus D laser 1, it's going to send it to laser 1. It's going to send it to the LP command destination of laser 1. That should print something out on your laser printer. If it does, then you do indeed have a jBASE problem, and we'll go into that in the next part. If it doesn't, large percentage of the time, we'll go through what we would do next. So if that does not print, then the jBASE printer is probably not the problem. It still could be, but it's probably not. The underlying Linux process is. Start by getting all the Linux spooler information about the printer. So now I know it's doing laser 1. What is laser 1? And that we can find that out with an LP stat command. LP stat is the line printer status. So I do LP stat. I'm going to just do minus T, which gives me everything on the whole system, everything about everything. And then I'm just going to grep out anything that has the word laser 1 in it. So with that in mind, I now know that the device for laser 1 is a socket / laser 1 9100. I know it is accepting requests. I know it is disabled right now since blah, 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 blah. So it just currently has these 2 print jobs in there. So laser 1 accepting request. Yes, it is. That's good. If not, I needed to jump to C. Well, it is accepting requests, so I don't need to jump to C. Printer laser 1 is idle. Enabled. Oops, mine is not enabled. Mine says disabled since blah, 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 blah. So I need to jump to C. So I'm going to jump to C. Is laser 1 accepting requests and enabled? If not, change cups to have the printer accept jobs and enable. So right now it is accepting jobs, but it is not enabled. So I can do both the commands. It doesn't hurt. I really only in this case need to do this command, the cups enable laser 1. Now we're to that pound sign. The reason the pound sign exists is because I am a super user or a SU or root. So if I logged in as root, I would be at a pound sign. If I've got root privileges, I can do what's called a sudo and run things as root and run this one command. So in the case of what this is saying, I would run this command and then run this command. I know this command doesn't need to be run, so we're not going to take the time here. We're just going to go ahead and run the second command. So sudo cups enable laser 1. So I will do that. Paste. Oops. I got to do a cut first, don't I? Cut. Come back over here. Let's get rid of all that garbage. And we'll paste. So I will sudo cups enable laser 1. When I do that, it says you're trying to do an administrative command. Are you an administrator? I happen to be an administrator. If you're not an administrator, when you type your password in, it's going to say you did a bad thing. You are not an administrator and cannot do this. If that's true, then you'll have to get with your administrator and have him do the command, or get with your administrator and have him set you up so you can do the command. In this case, I can do it. I just need to put in my password. So I'll do my password. And I won't read it out loud. I type it in right. Survey says never the first time. There we go. So now it's enabled. And now those print jobs that are out there are going to disappear because I disabled it so that I could see those print jobs for this class. It's now enabled. And so now my printer would start printing. I'm done. Well, that's not what we were going to go over during this class. So we'll back up a little and go over the rest. But you can see how that's part C of this document. So that enabled the printer, and now it started printing. If I was to do that LP stat minus T now with the grep, for laser 1, you'll see, we'll start over again at this document. You'll see now that it says device for label laser is this. It says accepting requests. So that's good. We don't need to jump to C. It says enabled. So we don't need to jump to C. But if what we printed didn't print out, we're going to go to the next steps. So the very first step, the most of the time what you're going to have a problem with is this laser 1 either is not set up in your Etsy host, or the IP address it's set up to go to is not bringing anything back. So in order for me to test that, I am going to turn my printer off, and we'll go from that and be able to see that it will not find this printer. So we'll turn it off. So now I'm going to go back to the beginning and do this little echo command. And I'm going to do the LP stat minus T, get my whole bit. And now I see it is accepting. I see it is enabled, but I also see it has a print job just hanging out there. Why is that hanging out there? So is laser 1 a valid entry in DNS or Etsy host? And is the network down? Now, let me tell you right away, this laser 1 on your system may be an actual IP address. It may actually be 192.168.4.58. If it is, then DNS and your Etsy host have nothing to do with it. If it is not, and it is a name, the way that name gets converted over is via either a DNS service, domain name services, or your Etsy host. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and do exactly what it says here. And I'm going to ping it. I only want to ping it once, and I only want to wait for a second for it to come back. Otherwise, if I just did a ping, which a lot of people do, it will constantly ping it, and then I've got to break out of it, or it will take forever to time out, and etc. This just makes it quick. So I do that, it comes right back. It says, oh, it transmitted a packet, but 0 got received, 100% packet loss. So if I got this 64 bytes from blah, 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 it looks good, that would have been okay. I would have proceeded to B. Since I did not get this, and I got 100% packet loss, or if it would have so I got 100% packet loss. So did it return name or service not known? No, it did not. If ping returns laser 1 name or service not known, did it? Nope, it did not. If ping gets 1 packet transmitted, 0 received, 100%, oh, that's the one, then we need to check the network. So I looked over here. Is the cable plugged in? Is the hub that maybe that is plugged into plugged in? Is it powered on? Is the printer on? Voila, there's our problem. I know that one because I turned it off. But in this case, that's what I'm going to do. I'll turn the printer back on. I'll turn the printer back on. And now I can run this ping again. I don't know that I have it in my thing, so I'll do it. I'll just do an up arrow. I'll ping it. Now in this case, it's on. It just hasn't gotten up to say it's on the network yet, but it will in just a second. It will in just a second. Nothing in the world of computers is just a second, but there it is. We call that a Microsoft second or a computer second. So in a few seconds, in about 30 seconds, it looked like it reset that printer, and now you can see it does ping it. So now it pings it. If we went back and did the LP stat minus T again, you'll see that print job is missing. If I look over on my printer, it's because it's printed out on my printer. So there we fixed the problem of 0 transmits. Usually it's going to be a cable. The next thing is it's going to be, quite often it's funny, but it can be just, oh, we turned the printer off last night. And then are the hubs and et cetera, the devices between powered up. So now we've kind of eliminated that as a problem. So I'm going to emulate this other problem where this line does not exist somewhere. So I'm going to, if you close your eyes right now, act like this isn't happening. I'm going to set it up so that this, it may be in here, but it's got a different address. Well, nope, different address would be another problem, and I don't think I actually mentioned that. Where I said here 100% packet loss, that could be this. I'm going to put that in here because what could happen is you could try and ping laser 1, and laser 1 is an address that is an invalid address. So let me change that. Put a 5. I just want to make sure I'm right about that. So now when we ping this, it's going to give us the 100% packet loss again. Now the reason for the 100% packet loss could actually be, and I'm going to update this document. I'm going to put it as the second one. Most of the time it's going to be that problem, but it could have been DNS, well, I'm going to say the Etsy hosts, as in A. Well, really, I guess as above could exist, but not be correct. So this could exist, but it's pointing to, 5.58 instead of 4.58. So is the IP correct? That's what I'm talking about there. So if you did get this 100% packet loss and you did not get name or service not known, it knew the service, then maybe this is not the right IP address for that printer. A little more technical, but you could always go to the printer, print out the configuration of the printer, find out what IP address it is, find out if it's the wrong IP address. If it's done in the Etsy host, those are going to be hard coded, so they will be specific numbers. If it's a part of your DNS, it gets a little more complicated because that would be a part of your DNS server, which would be a thing to check with your administrator and find out why it's not coming back. I'll go over that just a little bit, but there's not a whole lot we can do at this level except to see if it's working or not working. In this case, a little more complicated. We're getting this problem. You checked all the cables, everything's okay. Now you really need to check the Etsy host or the DNS and see that the IP is correct. In this case, that's a little more, like I said, a little more in depth, because now you've got to see what the IP is on the printer. So you've either got to go to the configuration of the printer if it's a hard-coded, or you get into DNS, which is more of your network administrator type of a thing. So right now, I could print that out. I print out my little thing paper. It says this printer is on 192.168.4.58. I look here, see, oh, I'm going to 5.58. In that case, I need to do this step, which is edit the host and change it. So that's what we're going to do at this point. So again, that has a pound sign on it, so I can either do it that way, I'll put that in this document, or I'll sudo vi/hosts. And you know why we're doing the sudo is because we're not root, but we're a person that can do root type of things. This is a root type thing. So I will sudo etc hosts. I'll go into here. I'll go, oh, on my piece of paper, that's a 4. So I replace that with a 4. Back out. Now when I ping laser 1, it comes back. So now my laser printer is working again. So that would be one of the ways that you would run into a problem with your printer if you got the 100% packet loss. If we get back that returns name or service not known, then we need to look at the etc hosts. And I'm again going to kind of cheat, and we're going to change this. We're going to fix the other side. So maybe it didn't get called laser 1. Maybe it got called laser I1 because somebody just fat fingered it, which I quite often do. Again, this would normally be something that the printer never worked. You're not going to have this happen very often, that a printer does work and somebody went in and altered the etc host. It could happen. They could have been changing another line and they messed this line up. So it is something you'll need to look at, but normally that's going to be because it got typed wrong in the first place. So we're going to go ahead and right quick get out of that. And now we'll say, hey, ping that laser 1. Well, guess what? Laser 1 doesn't exist. Why? etc host didn't have it in there. So you can see how etc host, if you're using names, etc hosts needs to be correct. So I'll go in here, we'll correct that. Ping it again, and now you see that we have it. So that is working with the etc hosts file. That's normally on larger systems, Linux type systems, people are going to have hard-coded printers because you're not working with an Office Depot DNS type printer that needs to be able to be plugged in anywhere and just work. You have a network administrator that is assigned IP addresses, and they're going to be assigned in the etc host this way. Another way, like I said, you'll quite often see is instead of this saying socket laser 1, it would actually say socket 192.168.458:9100. Not even have a name. That name is an optional type of thing. If the name is not in the etc host, it is possible it is a part of the DNS, which is your domain name services. Now, domain name services really can't be altered from Linux unless your Linux is your domain name server. But it even at that point is much more complicated than something I would want to go into during this. However, there is a command that at least will let us know whether the domain name service sees it. So with that, we can do a dig command, and the dig is just simply asking it to go out to the domain name server and find something. So if I was to dig for www.zumasys.com and did a short comeback, that should have come back. Oh, let's try local. Well, I guess I don't know dig. Oh, I didn't want to do minus short. Believe it or not, on this one, it's plus. It has plus and minus. Plus short. So that gives me all of the domain, the IP addresses that it finds for www.zumasys.com. That's what you normally think of as DNS services. I type in that I want to go to Zumasys. The browser goes to the DNS and says, where is Zumasys? And it'll come back and say, oh, Zumasys is here. And if this was busy, it would say Zumasys is here. And if not, it would say Zumasys is here. You can have a domain name services for your printers. So just real quick, dig laser1 plus short would return the IP address for that laser if we had it set up in local DNS. So it is not set up in local DNS. It's set up in Etsy hosts. I just really want to mention the DNS only because it can be there. There's really not a whole lot we can do if it's a problem. The only other thing you could possibly do if you want to just bypass DNS is change your device assignment. Instead of making it for laser 1, make it specifically for 192.168.4.58. But again, you would have to be the guy. I'm not going to go into setting up Linux printers. You would have to be the person that knows how to set up Linux printers. Or if you want to call support, we can help you with that. Or if you have a Linux administrator and you can just tell him, hey, this one that goes socket laser 1, can you change that to socket 192.168.458? 9100. Once he's done that, then you can do your test and be able to not worry about whether DNS comes into play. So DNS is pretty much it works or it doesn't. Not something we're going to be able to really work with today, but you could bypass it that way. So now we've looked at two of the major ways that printers do not work. Like I said, most of the time, if they do not work with this, it's usually going to be this one here. I'm going to cut. This is a working document here, so I'm going to put that at the very top because that is most of the time what is going to happen. So most of the time, that's going to be your problem. You've got a cable that's not connected, or you got a hub that's not on. And most of the time, you got a printer that's just not on. Now, instead of saying as in the above, I'm going to say or check Etsy host or DNS as below. It may not be correct. It may be there, but it's not correct. So if it's not there, that's one line. Does it exist? If it exists and it's wrong, would be the other problem. So hopefully you've got an understanding of that. The next is port 9100 open on that IP address? So let's say I've got this, my ping, back to my ping, and it does go through. I see the printer. What I really see is just simply there is something on 192.168.458. I do not know that that is a printer. I do not know that the printer port is open at that point. So if that comes through, but it still didn't print, it could be because you're trying to send your print job to a computer, or you may be trying to send your print job to a scanner, or you may be trying to send your print job to anything that's an IP address out there. It may be a disk drive. So it is not necessarily checking with ping that the port that is for printers is being used. It's only checking that the cable has a device that goes to that number, to 4.58. So again, we're gonna do a little bit of a cheat. If I do, let me do an IP config here. No, in Linux it's if config. We do an if config here, and you can see this printer or this computer itself is 192.168.4.28. So if I was to ping laser 1, and let's say laser 1 was pointing to 192.168.4.28, so I was pinging 192.168.4.28. and I'll use the same minus C1 minus W1. So if, let's say that that had resolved to that number. You're going to see it went through. It did receive it. 0% packet loss. Why is it not printing? Well, it wouldn't print because that's not a printer. That's actually this machine. So the next step we're going to do is port 9100 open on that IP address? A part of your address was laser 1 and then 9100. That means it was printing to port 9100 on that address. So is port 9100 of that address open? So I'm going to go ahead and run this command, which is a netcat command. If netcat is not installed, you can install it with yum processes. Again, you may need to bring your administrator in for that. Most people have netcat installed. It is a simple command that allows you to send things to a specific IP and port number. So we're sending it to 192.168.458, port 9100. If it can send it, it will return a 0. If it cannot send it, it will return something other than 0 saying why it could not send it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You'll see it return to 0. That's because I got my printer setting here and it's on 9100. So everything should be fine. If it does not come back with a 0, it would be because of something like we just talked about, where instead of being 58, that was 28. It pinged, but it is not an actual printer. So when I do this, you'll see it comes back with connection refused. Now, most of the time it's going to come back with connection timed out, which means it wouldn't even accept it. And it wouldn't even say it doesn't accept it. A lot of devices are, especially with security nowadays, they won't even let you know they exist. So that's what you'll quite often get. On my machine, I go ahead and accept a ping. So I also accept a port scan on 9100, which brings me back the same problem. It's still a number 1, but this one happens to say connection refused. So if that happens and you know that your IP address was correct because it was 58, then it's probably just you're going to have to reset the printer, or if it's connected to a device, an actual print device, you're going to need to reset the print device. That's one of the options. If it never worked ever, is port 9100 correct? Is it even a socket printer? Maybe it's not that type of printer that would work as a socket laser 9100. Maybe it's a LPD type of printer. Again, you're getting into the administrator doing this, but if you had originally set it up. So this would be normally if it never worked. If it ever did work, then probably just resetting the printer is going to fix it. I'm going to put in here, because it can come into play, is the Etsy host or IP address from DNS correct? Again, if DNS or your Etsy host gave you back 28 and it's really setting at 58, then it's going to point to the wrong device and then not be able to get to it. So this can always come into play. You could be able to ping it. You could be able to get things back. Everything would look wonderful. It's right. It's correct in here. It looks correct, but again, the big thing here is the IP correct? So it's in the Etsy hosts, but just because it's there doesn't necessarily mean it's in there correctly. So if it's now in there correctly and it worked at one time, then probably most of the time this is going to be your answer. If that's not your answer, this may be your answer. If that's not your answer, it could be, like I said, if it never worked, that you just never set it up correctly in the first place. It never was a socket printer. And up a little. Okay. So that's pretty much everything I can tell you about Linux printers, but that should get you through. And most of the time, you're going to have everything set up correctly. Again, once I reset this, it's normally going to be do everything. If not, start at step A and go back through again and see where it stops the next time. Fairly simple process of elimination on your printers. And then once you know that your Linux printer is working, then if it still doesn't print from jBASE, now you can look at the jBASE site. We'll go over that in just a second. So is the job listed at all? Sometimes when you just printed the job, it doesn't even show up. If that is true, it means cups is totally not working. It's not even accepting print jobs. Not normally something that could happen, but if so, you can do a service cups restart, and that will restart the cup service. Even if you're on the newer Linux that doesn't use services but uses system control, that command will still work. So that's why I use that command. It'll work in Red Hat, anything from Red Hat 4 through Red Hat 8. So if you're not used to that command, it could be because it's an older command that just gets converted on your version of Red Hat or your version of Linux. This is definitely Red Hat centric. If there are some differences between the different different Linux platforms, but currently that's our most supported platform. So that's what this document is about. Again, service is a administrator command, so you either have to do it from the root or you can do sudo service and restart. The only thing about that is if someone was in the middle of a print job, it is a possibility, depending on how cups is set up, on how it does its restarts and etc., that it could lose the print job or could restart the print job from the very beginning once it saw, oh, okay, services went away, or it could recover. So it's really best to not have any users on when you do that. If that's not a concern, if print jobs are something that you could live with one being skipped, then you don't necessarily need to kick users off. It is not a thing that's going to corrupt anything, but it could lose one print job or lose a print job that somebody is in the middle of. So just that as a note. So at this point, we should have our Linux printer printing. If we have our Linux printer printing after going through D, or if the very first time it worked, you can skip all this section and jump right to step 3 because Linux is working. Now we have a problem in jBASE. A problem in jBASE, so the underlying process works, it's a jBASE problem. A problem in jBASE is, get back to the JSH, oops, I typed in JSH here. Go over here to this screen and I'll get back to the JSH and we'll do that list PTR again. This one's got a few more things and it's showing assigns and kills and etc. If this says assigned, there's not much you can do in the world of jBASE. Call support. You gotta get with jBASE support and find out why it's not working. However, you'll probably find it either is going to say an IO error, or it's going to say killed, or it's going to killed means the jBASE process that runs that process has died for some reason. It could be somebody actually killed the PID. It could be that something got corrupted in the world of Linux and it killed that process. An IO error is normally there was a problem back here on the Linux side. It's been resolved, but the jBASE program doesn't know about it. So again, it just needs to be restarted. So most of the time, if you've got a jBASE error, a jBASE printer problem, you're going to see something other than assigned in your listing, and all you can really do is restart the spooler. If you do a restart spooler, that should change these assigned or these IO errors and kills to assigned, and the printer should start working. If that doesn't fix it, then it's kind of like the cups world. You really want to make sure nobody's actually printing anything at the time, but you can just do an SP shutdown, which will kill all these Linux processes, shut everything down. It waits about 30 seconds because it actually does a 30-second timeout. If you've got hundreds of printers, it may take more than a minute. If you have one printer, it's going to take at least 30 seconds, but it very seldom takes a lot of time. And then rest-spooler will restart the printer. Now, once SP shutdown is run, all your print jobs will remain out there. It's not like it deletes anything. It just simply doesn't print them at the time. You need to do the rest spooler in order to restart the printer. Once you've done the rest spooler, then again, you should see assigned on all the printers. If you don't, it's a time to call jBASE support, and we'll have to look into something more. That's going to probably handle 95% of your problems or questions in jBASE Linux printers if you have already set them up, and that's really what we're talking about here. So thank you, and that's everything you need to know about jBASE Linux printers.